popping out every day, prom night. So if it's all love, show me love.
I'm back, and today we're going to do part 2 of Vanderpump Rules. I don't know where you guys are, if you guys are caught up with Vanderpump, but this season has been quite the tea. Pretty much like last season, right? Like, last season was really the big boom, right? And then we really came back in this season. Really excited to see the aftermath of Tom and Tom's decisions to be with Rachel, aka Raquel. And it's a shame that we don't really get to see Rachel, aka Raquel. Maybe we'll see her shortly, but we don't really get to see her. I'm really actually concerned about her to see like what's happening with her. But today we're going to talk about Katie, Tom Schwartz, and Tom Sandoval. And then part 3, we're just going to focus on Tom, send some prayers out for Tom, some good vibes for Tom. Because this show, we're not about bashing people. We're simply about looking at some of the presenting issues and how can we help and support. None of us are perfect. We all have stuff. Lord knows I have my own. So this is just a safe space, as therapy should be for clients, to talk about some of the things they're going through. And I think it's really courageous that these people, I mean, they get paid well for it, right? But, to put their business out there is a lot. It's a lot. If any of us out here listening or watching put our personal business out there, I'm sure it would not be very pleasant. There would be some moments that wouldn't be so great, right? So let's talk about Katie first. So Katie, I'll be quite honest. When I first started watching Vanderpump Rules and she was hanging out with Stassi, I was a little triggered. The whole mean girl thing. We won't get into my own stuff, my own self-disclosure, as we call in therapy, but I was a little triggered by the whole Stassi, Katie, mean girl vibe that was happening. Especially with Kristen, poor Kristen went through the ringer with those girls. Sheena kind of reminds me of Kristen in this way of, I want to be friends with these girls and it's never good enough. And in those kinds of dynamics, you have to have leaders and you have to have followers, right? So Katie, now that we don't see Stassi on the show, now that she's not married to Tom Schwartz, we see Katie kind of doing her own thing, being with Ariana, doing the sandwich shop. I really love the way they co-parent with their dogs, her and Tom. I think Katie's grown a lot from her divorce. Now that she's lived some life, she's had some life experiences, she's a little less judgy. She's still a little bit more judgy than I would like to see, but Katie said in the last episode that I watched that she's a good judge of character. And I think she probably is. She's very observant. Katie can read people really well, I think. But she's very standoffish and still, I feel like, a little bit judgmental. She's got a soft spot in her place for Tom, of course, Tom Schwartz, and, they co-parent well. But this stuff with Ariana, I feel like she shouldn't be getting involved. That's just my personal opinion. So Katie, if I had a client with some of the same, presenting as Katie does on the show, I would really be working with that client on building trust with others, trying to get to the bottom of why we don't trust others, what's triggered, what people trigger us and why. Do they remind us of someone else? And what's the judgment about? Why are we so judgmental about other people? This whole thing with Ariana and Tom and Sheena, and especially, Katie kind of goes for Sheena, and I don't really think Sheena deserves that, like I've said in the last segment. what's that about? What is the judgy stuff about? When I have clients that come in that are constantly talking about what other people are doing and why people are doing things, I really force them to kind of put the mirror on themselves. Let's focus in on ourselves. What's coming up for us when someone's behaving in the way they do? Are we being triggered by it? Sorry, my computer's doing all kinds of things. It's early in the morning. Are we being triggered by it? What's coming up for us? And how do we start to learn to manage what's coming up for us so that we can continue to focus on our growth instead of other people's growth, right? But again, we're on a show, so I digress. This is part of probably what Katie should be doing if she, for the show. But I really feel for Sheena, especially after they just went on this retreat with Tom. Ariana doesn't seem to really have any space to understand where Sheena's coming from, and I don't really think it's very fair to Sheena. Ariana has every right to not want to be around Tom, but for her to kind of tell everybody else, well, if you're friends with him, I'm not friends with you. She says, well, I'm not, making you choose sides. Sounds like you're making people choose sides, and that doesn't feel great, right? So if I had a client like Katie who presented in the same way, I would definitely be working with them on trusting other people. I'm pretty sure, I don't know what her attachment style is, if she's an avoidant attachment style, but I do know that Katie could foster some more nurturing relationships in her life with more trust. She doesn't trust people, and I'm not really sure what that's about. And I would like to get down to the bottom of it, doing some like psychodynamic work with her around triggers and who in her life has treated her unfairly, or who in her life maybe that she looked up to, she kind of found out wasn't who they said they were. So where's that come from for her, and help her work through that. So let's go to Tom Schwartz. So Tom Schwartz definitely has an anxious attachment style. We know this. We've seen it. He has a lot of anxiety just in general, probably has ADHD. I think he's actually talked about that on the show. I hope that he's getting the help he needs for that. Tom Schwartz fits the profile of many, male clients that I see actually. And so, we have a big place in our heart for Tom. He wants to bring people together. He doesn't like conflict. He hates conflict. He gets anxious around conflict. I would be working with Tom around some meditation techniques, some somatic therapy, getting into his body, also some ADHD techniques to help him kind of concentrate, focus on tasks, goal setting, holding him accountable, things like that. Really setting boundaries for himself around people and what feels good for him and what doesn't. And really trying to work through that anxious attachment style, really trying to figure out where that comes from. We know in his dynamic with his family, I believe he has twin brothers, and I think he's kind of giving me middle child kind of vibes. So really working with him to manage his anxiety, and make sure that he can manage it well, and also recognize when people are overstepping his boundaries. I think Tom Schwartz, to segue from Tom Schwartz to Sandoval, I think Tom Schwartz has been a really good friend to Tom Sandoval, and Tom Sandoval has been a good friend to Schwartz. This whole thing last season, though, with Raquel, and telling Tom Schwartz you should date Raquel was kind of weird. It kind of felt like Sandoval was kind of trying to divert the attention away from him in a way that wasn't great. And then, of course, Schwartz kind of got thrown under the bus, as we saw. And people were really kind of pointing the finger at him until we knew what we knew, right? So I would say that I didn't like that about Sandoval. Now, a lot of people are saying, going into Sandoval, that he's a narcissist. And this third segment, we'll look at the DSM and see what a narcissist is. Okay, we'll talk about that. However, in my personal and clinical opinion, I have many clients and friends and families that are throwing around this word narcissist. They're a narcissist. There are not many people in the United States that have narcissistic personality disorder. It's not very common. And I like to call it narcissistic flavors. There are many people that have narcissistic flavors. So they have some of the characteristics that aren't great, but it doesn't mean they're a narcissist. And us diagnosing people and saying they're a narcissist without, getting psychological testing is really, really unethical to do so. And it's really not fair to Sandoval to put that label on him, that diagnosis on him. I will say Sandoval is really struggling with accountability, and I can understand how the cast is equating his lack of accountability or his struggle with accountability with these narcissistic flavors. If I had a client that came in with some of these presenting issues, again, really trying to focus on putting the mirror on themselves and really working through the shame, because I know Sandoval has a lot of shame for what he's done and he feels really bad about it. And the way he copes with it is to say, well, what about you did? And what about what you did? And what about what you did? And I mean, he's right. I mean, Lala did some things. They've all done things. I mean, none of their hands are clean. We look at James. I mean, he makes a good point about James. James was with Kristen and he didn't know, Tom didn't know, like Tom let that go. And now James to be like, you betrayed me. For those of you who believe in karma, it kind of feels like karma. At the same time and place is important. And I don't think this is the right time and place to bring that up. And on one end, I feel for Sandoval because he's right. I mean, everyone's hands are dirty on the show for the most part. Not Katie's, not Sheena's, pretty much everyone else. Ariana getting with Sandoval when he was with Kristen and she said they were friends. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know. That's their truth. However, time and place is important, and I feel and I hear the shame, and it's got to be really hard to have people on top of you about this 24/8. So I definitely would be working, if a client came in like this, I would be definitely checking for suicidal ideation, doing a safety plan, making sure we have that in place and have safety supports in place. But I'm also curious to find out what this infidelity pattern is about. Oftentimes when I have a client come in my office who is chronically unfaithful with partners, this moved from one partner to the next through cheating, I'm trying to dig down and find out where this comes from. This is a negative coping mechanism. When relationships get a little stale and we don't feel as seen or as wanted, this is a way oftentimes people cope. I want to feel alive. I want to feel seen. I want to feel special. And we really crave and look for that external validation. And I see that in Sandoval and clients like this who present in this way. So how can we replace that negative coping habit? First, where does it come from? Why is that the way we cope? 2, how do we replace it? How do we recognize it and replace it with something else, with a healthy coping mechanism? Because all relationships, for all of us out here who've been in long-term relationships, over a while they get kind of stale. I mean, you have to work on them. I always tell my couples, marriage is a verb. You got to work at it. We go to work every day. We spend a lot of time trying to get promoted, try to get raises, try to get trainings, try to get education. And then we come home and we kiss our partner and that's it. As much time as we spend at work, pouring into things, we need to be pouring into our relationship. And many of us lose sight of that because we're not taught that. Society doesn't talk about that. As much as you pour into your work, conferences and trainings, you need to pour into your relationship. Date nights and intimacy nights and gifts and words of affirmation and quality time. It's important. And so to work at that, to get back to that spark. However, in that dynamic, and I'll talk about this in segment 3 a little bit more, Ariana's hands aren't clean either. I mean, we saw Sandoval and Ariana last season really struggle in their relationship, and Ariana being really avoidant. So I don't know the intricacies of what they tried to do to make it work. I'm pretty sure Sandoval recognizes he didn't make a great decision. But again, if I had a client presenting in this manner, I would really be working with them on taking their own accountability, and the shame. Shame is the worst feeling, worst emotion we can have. So really having to work through and heal from the shame is important. So I really hope that Sandoval is in therapy, and I really would recommend he say less. I've seen some quotes of things he said, and it doesn't sound great. I don't know if he made the George Floyd quote. I don't know if that was real or not. I really hope it wasn't, because it doesn't look great. It's one of those things when I tell couples, when a partner is unfaithful, you're in the doghouse. And you're going to be in the doghouse, and you're going to have to take the licks for a while. And you just got to take them. That's it. There's nothing you can say, I'm sorry, even really, that's going to make it better. You just kind of have to take the licks, and that's hard, especially when you're on TV. So really working with this type of client to find ways to manage that stress, while also trying to find out, where did this coping skill come from? What is all of this external validation that's needed? What is that about? Where do we get that internal validation? How important that is? And we see Sandoval, right? He's in a band. I mean, he loves external validation. He loves that. He craves it. But the thing that we know about external validation is always comes up empty. It's never enough, right? It's never enough. So how do we get the internal validation? So that is my little spiel today on Katie, Tom, and Tom. We're going to do the third segment and just really talk about Sandoval a little bit more, someone who presents in this manner. We're going to look at the DSM, narcissistic personality disorder, see some of the criteria that he may meet and the criteria that he doesn't meet, why it is problematic to give people these kinds of diagnoses, and also talk more about shame. So I will see you on video 3. Stay tuned.